Hi everyone, and welcome to our webinar. I'm Jean Balfour, the facilitator for our conversation today about the big working from home experiment that we're doing at the moment, asking this question, are we working or are we shirking? And I really look forward to going on this journey with you today in the next half hour. A couple of practical things about working with Zoom. This is the first time we're using Zoom webinar. We work with Zoom a lot in our coaching program, but first time on webinars. You will either be accessing this on your computer and laptop or your phone or your tablet. There is the ability to both chat, ask questions, and we will be using polling. And if you can't see where the functionality is for those, either if you're on your computer, the buttons are at the bottom. You should see the buttons that give you the Q&A or the chat. If you're on your phone, you need to tap on the screen and the options should pop up. So I hope that's going to be reasonably clear. During the workshop today, I will be answering some of the questions that people asked when we went during the registration, and also will be answering the questions that you want to ask as we go through today. So please do type your questions in either to the Q&A or into the chat, and I will answer them. So for example, I can see one question here that's asked, is one observation is that people may get burned out when they're working from home. There's lots of conferences, conference meetings, lots of calls and things. Any tips to manage that? And I will certainly make sure I cover that as we go through the session today. Just to say a little bit about us before we get going, we are a company based in Singapore and we do three main things. We run an ICF accredited coach training business where we train people to be ACC or PCC accredited through our ACTP programs. And I'll say a little bit more about those at the very end. We also run a lot of coaching skills for leaders programs, both in Zoom in a virtual classroom and also face-to-face in organisations, although less of that at the moment. And then finally, we provide executive coaching to people in organisations. We also do that virtually or face-to-face. And today I'm going to talk through this challenge in a way that we have, but also opportunity about working from home. What are the advantages of it? How do we make it work? And how do we overcome some of the challenges that we're seeing? I'll talk a little bit about the theory, and then we'll look at really spend most of the webinar on practical tips and suggestions. And they come in two forms. One is, what about me when I'm working from home? And for those of you who are leaders, how does it work for you working from home? So we're going to start with a couple of polls, and the first poll is for you to ask, how many of you are working from home at the moment, all of the time, some of the time, and not at all? Perhaps I'll just tell you that I've just read before we came online on the news that NASA have just doing a big working at home experiment, and they've asked everybody to work from home in the coming week, I think it is. So even organisations like NASA are doing that. So let me share the results with you now. And what we're seeing is that some of you, all of the time, most of you, some of the time, and one person, not at all. So we've got a real mix, and really that, I guess, means that we've got blended work arrangements. Let's look at our next poll now and just see how many of you are leaders who are leading a team who work from home. So it'll be just interesting so I know where to get the balance of that. Okay, and it looks like, judging by what I'm seeing here, is that we've got a real mix. So let me just end that poll and share the results. That's about half of you are doing that and half of you aren't. So I will make sure that I share some of my thoughts about how to do that well in the session today. So as we go in, I thought it would be good to ask you a little bit about what do you see as the opportunities and the challenges? So I wonder if you could start by just typing into the chat, what do you think are some of the challenges of working from home? We've already heard one possibility, that it might be that people get burnout. What are some of the other challenges of working from home? This could be either for you as an individual, or this could be you as a leader. So somebody said isolation. Yes, the sense of aloneness and being separate, if you like. Another person said, yeah, sense of loneliness. Less interaction, less water cooler moments. We're going to talk about those today. Are people being honest? How do we build trust in that way? Opportunities of balancing work and life are challenges, and the lack of social interaction may not be as productive as working from the office, as there's so many distractions, kids, washing, that kind of thing. Getting some peace and quiet from when the kids are back from school. Yes, let's hope they don't close the schools. That makes that even more challenging. Distraction and noises. How do you gauge if people have delivered productively is another question, and a bit more about isolation. Okay, what are the advantages? Let's just hear a little bit about what some of the advantages might be. So somebody's saying collaboration with other team members. That can be a challenge. I guess that's where that's come, because it can be harder in some ways to do that. What other challenges? Opportunities. Somebody said they don't have to shower. Yes, so we can kind of get up and go. Flexibility, time saved on the commute, definitely there. We can be much more productive. Somebody's saying that for them, productivity is definitely increased when they're working from home. What else? What else is an opportunity? Yeah, somebody else saying increased productivity, no interruptions, better concentration, save time and money on commuting. Yeah, that's also true. Okay, so thank you for sharing that. Let's go on and have a bit of a look at what we are. So just the last poll, as we go into this bit of it, is what do you think about your productivity? So we've heard a little bit going through this about some of you saying that you think actually you're more productive at home. But I hear a lot from leaders about concern that people are less productive. And so I'm interested to see where you think you are when you're working from home. What's the balance for that? And for those of you who feel that you're less productive, I hope you'll go away with some practical ideas today to see how you can make that work better. Okay, let me share the results. So we've got a real split here. Some people are more productive, that's for sure. Some people no change, and some people are less productive. So actually a real spread, and I really hope that today you'll go away with some practical thoughts. Just on those practical thoughts, as I go through the session today and you think you've got an idea that I haven't shared, please do type it into the chat or the Q&A, and when we pause for questions, I will also share the ideas that you have about doing this. So let's just start though, but looking at a very famous example of one of the challenges working from home. I'll just start playing the video. I've turned the sound off because we thought actually the sound didn't add much to this, but many of you will have seen it. I've watched it many times in the last few days. It still makes me smile every time. In our own team today, we had some children join the team meeting. So I'll kind of let you enjoy this, the child, the baby, the mother in the room, enjoying this panic, this sense of stress for this man as his children are leaving. Now, many of you will, I hope, enjoying the sense of this video. Many of you will have seen this, and then also seen that they did an interview. This was a BBC interview, that they did an interview with the family after this to sort of explain and understand the story about what was happening. So you've talked about many of the challenges. I'm going to elaborate on a couple of these. We hear about productivity, and you're saying that that you worry, that some of you worry that you're not as productive, and what we hear is that both employees and leaders worry in various ways about productivity. As you've mentioned, we get a feeling and a loss of connection and communication. We lose all that incidental bumping into each other in the lift, in the corridors, in the restrooms and the pantries. We lose that kind of sense of informal communication that's happening all the time. There's also a sense of loneliness and people missing each other. I heard somebody say this week that this real loss of connection with other people. We know that some of you even, but we know that certainly some colleagues in China have really been stuck in their apartments now for nearly 2 months, and that's pretty tough. You're with your family, no doubt that's causing some family tensions as well. And I think in that we realise just how important the relationships we have with our colleagues are, and how important it is that we see them and we have that sense of team when we're in the office. So we also get that loss of a sense of team. There's also the idea of distraction. And I want to talk a bit about distraction today, because I think that we see distraction at home as the family, the kids, the dog, the washing, all of the things that are going on at home. And my thinking about this is that I know from the people who work in office, I've worked from home for a long time myself now, is that that people in the office also talk about distraction. And in fact, the research about open plan offices now is that the level of distraction in open plan is so high that that is actually affecting productivity as well. So I think for us, there's a question of, are those distractions actually worse than the office? They're different, that's for sure. Are they worse? And then of course, this challenge of what to do with people in our lives. So very briefly, I'm going to just jump through the research. So there's a lot of research that's been going on in this connectivity age where we're connected through so many different medium. And what the research is showing is that loneliness levels are rising, because even if we sit next to each other in the office, we're just as likely to chat on the instant messenger as we are to turn to each other and have a conversation. And this is really going against our brain. So the neuroscientists, including particularly Matt Lieberman, have been researching how important is it to our brains and to our whole well-being to be connected to people. And he says, being socially connected is our brain's lifelong passion. It's been baked into our operating system for tens of millions of years. And so this idea that it's okay for us to be isolated actually doesn't work. And if you think about it, we punish people by putting them in isolation. We do solitary confinement as a form of punishment, the kind of ultimate punishment, be on your own. And so here we are, in a way, we're moving away from community to being quite isolated, to working from home. And Karen Sobel-Lejeski's done a lot of work looking at virtual workers and asking these questions about where does it have an impact. And she saw three places. Physical distance, that's the practical, we're not sitting in the office, but she also described that as being on different floors, creating that distance. Operational distance, that's, are we working closely together as a team, or are there breakdowns in the way that happens? Are we not working as well as we could? And the third one is affinity distance. And this is this lack of human connection and looking at the things that stop deep relationships. And from her research, she said, it's affinity distance that makes the difference. It's whether we connect and empathize and talk to each other or not that is the real difference. As long as we do that, we overcome the physical and operational distance. And so my thinking today and my work with you is to think about what can we do to make sure we've got those human connections and those human bonds to get everything working really well. And the final bit of research was a study that was done recently working with Ctrip. They're a large Chinese travel company, and they wanted to see what would happen with their call center if they asked people to work from home. And this is interesting because call centers have traditionally expected people to come into the office. And from the study, what they saw was it led to a 13% performance increase. And that came from people basically having fewer breaks and more sick days. Now, that in itself could be a problem because the breaks, of course, are where we recover and get resilience, but also more calls per minute, so it was more productive. But the real important thing is this last point, that workers said they improved work satisfaction and their attrition rate halved. So it does look like we can actually get, in a way, the holy grail of the same productivity or a bit more potentially, as well as well-being for ourselves with some working from home. And I want to go on now and talk a bit about what are the practical things that we can do. As I'm going, please do feel free to either type into the chat any questions you have, or also type into the chat examples that you have of things that you would do. So let's just start by talking about how do we manage our environment? How do we stop the kids dashing in behind us when we're on the international news? So the first suggestion I have is to create a home space. Now, some of you will have the luxury of having a room that you can do that with, but for some of you, you will be sharing your home with many people and it may be small. And the challenge then is, how do you do that? So my suggestion is that you find a corner or a space, wherever you are, whatever size it is, that's yours, and that you talk to your family about, when I'm working from home, this is where I'll be working, and this is my space. So it's my opportunity to create that space. So one of my colleagues, for example, has set up a space in her bedroom, has created a corner where there's a windowsill, put books on the windowsill, a little table for the computer to go on. It's a very small space, but it is very much a space where she can work that's hers and she can be private. For some of you, it might work best for you to work at the kitchen table or to work on the sofa, but there's something about creating a space and working out what's best for you. And you might want to play with it, move around the apartment, see what works in the best way. Also good to have an open conversation with family, and I say pets because I have a lot of dog barking in various environments. I don't mind that, but some people do. So one of the things that we can do is say, let's have a bit of a family meeting and talk about how do we get this working? How do we make sure that we can not interrupt each other? What are the interruption rules? What is it okay to do and not do? Even having conversations with the kids and really sitting down and sort of having a family meeting with the kids if they're old enough to understand, and saying, you know, we've got new working arrangements, and in order to make this work, this is what needs to happen. And that might mean that when the kids come home from school, for example, you take a 15-minute break or even a half-hour break and spend some time with them so that they feel that you've connected with them, and then you go back to work. But looking for ways to be transparent and explicit about that. I'm a big fan of getting dressed. I often talk to coaching clients about dress for the job you want, not the job you have. Now, for me, that means that most of the time, if I'm working from home and I'm not on camera, I'm in shorts and a t-shirt. That's the truth, but I am dressed, I'm not in my pajamas. I think there's something really psychologically important about getting dressed and getting ready for the day that helps us to feel that we are going to work, that we're actually doing that. Also important to plan healthy snacks and meals and make sure that we are eating well, because we don't have access to some of the food, the variety of food that we have outside. You know, I know for me that I can resort to toast if I'm at home too long, rather than making myself a salad, which I would do if I was out. So take some of the time that you're not using on your commute to think about your eating and your exercise habits. And then finally, just a final point, music or no music, headsets help. In fact, one of my colleagues has just bought a noise cancelling headset, one for a construction site, to put on to drown out the background noise and the distractions so that she can really concentrate on what she's doing. I know some people use earplugs. For me, I love to work with music, so that's fine. That helps it look like I'm that, but it also looks like I'm on a call. Just one other very practical tip. If you are doing a lot of calls from home and you have family around, you might want to think of a symbol or something that you put that says, I'm on a call, don't interrupt me, somewhere around you. It could just be a piece of paper, or it could be that you all agree, you know, when the orange ball's on my desk, I'm on a call, something like that, so everybody knows. And thanks. I can see some tips. First of all, one is saying we need to be careful of the ergonomics sitting on the sofa. Too true, actually. So whatever you'll do when you're working from home, be careful about your back and all the things that would be looked after in the office. You will have ergonomically designed chairs if we're in the office. Often our furniture at home is not designed for sitting on for 8 hours at a time, and we shouldn't be sitting for 8 hours at a time anyway, but more on that in a minute. Somebody else is saying we create a culture that accepts our kids and our pets as our lives. So when we work from home, it's okay for them to come into videos. In our team, we did this just today. two children came to one of the rooms, and we just stopped and we had a conversation with them and said hi and just enjoyed them, and how lovely it was to do that, to be there. So really not shooing them away, but welcoming them. It's a part of the reality of our working lives. So thanks for sharing, keep sharing. Okay, next bit is managing our time, which is in the heart of productivity. I'd really like to recommend here a very good book called Deep Work by Cal Newport. All of his work is really good and sound, and it really has impacted me a lot. It's valuable both for home working and office working, actually, this book. Now, couple of the practical things that I think apply for us working at home is this idea of time blocking. What that means is that we say, between this time and this time, I'm working on this, and I'm either interruptible or I'm not interruptible, depending on what I'm working. But at the end of that time, I stop working on that and I take a break. So if you think about your life in the office, when you work, people come and interrupt you. You get up and go and make a cup of tea. You go to the restroom. You walk over to somebody's desk to have a coffee. When we're at home, we're actually much less inclined to do that. The furthest we go is the kitchen. And so one of the things that I think it's important to do is to make sure we build in those breaks. So the research about this says that 50 minutes is really our optimal productivity concentration time. Our brains were not programmed to concentrate for 8 hours. If we do 50 minute stint, sit at the computer, do some work, or sit on a call, that's also work, do the call, then take a 10-minute break and get up, go walk around the apartment, go and make a cup of tea, go and look out the window, maybe read an article, take 10 minutes to listen to a podcast that might help generate you, do the washing, none of which we should feel guilty about, because what we will then do is go back to concentrate. And to manage this with our colleagues and say, because we're working at home, it doesn't mean we'll be available all the time. If you think in the office, if somebody's not at their desk, we don't think, oh, they're not working. We just think, oh, they must have gone to get a coffee. So we somehow, when people are working at home, hold a different perception. And so we can be explicit about that. Just taking a 10-minute break, I'll be back. We can manage that in the instant messenger. Anything that's explicit can help. So a few other tips. One is have lunch with a colleague. So as in taking regular breaks, get some lunch and just sit on either video, Zoom. You can use Zoom for free for up to 45 minutes, or whatever your organization's video chat is. Get your lunch and sit down and have lunch as you would be if you were working together. Don't forget to exercise, do a bit of stretching, anything that you can be doing for 10 minutes to help you get the blood working. Now, I want to talk a little bit about working hours. When we're working from home, we don't commute. So that means that we have, if your commute is an hour, 2 hours extra in our day that are not commuting. And what we often see from people working from home is that they'll use that time for more work. My suggestion is, don't do that. Use that time for exercise, or break your working day up, or use that time to make some healthy food, or have a conversation with a colleague, or read a leadership book, or take those extra 2 hours, not to mean that when you were working a 10-hour day already too long to a 12-hour day, take those extra 2 hours for your own health and well-being. On top of that, keep a track of your working hours. It's much harder to do it when we're at home. We can see that it can be very easy for the time to creep into the evening, or we start earlier. I know myself, I'm inclined to get up, and some days I come straight to my computer, and then I have to remind myself that just because I'm working from home doesn't mean I shouldn't go and make breakfast. Some people, one of my colleagues keeps a spreadsheet of her working hours so that she knows when she's working and makes sure it doesn't creep. And then finally, when it's the end of the day, have a ritual of some sort that says, now I'm not working, now it's my evening. And put your computer away. Maybe that's the time, for me, that might be the time I water the plants, because that's something I like to do a lot. I enjoy it. I have a chat with them, but do whatever is going on there in that way. Okay, and final slide for us before we move on to being a leader. And this is about working with colleagues. And for me, this is all about communication and compassion. So, for example, instead of using instant messenger, Gtalk, whatever, pick up the phone, get on video. In our own team, because we all work virtually, somebody will send me a question. Sometimes if I'm really busy, we'll just do it all over the chat. But actually, oftentimes I'll say, let's just jump on Zoom. So we get on Zoom and we connect. And then we feel like we're together and we're in that team, and then that's better. You need to update more and plan informal time. So plan time to just have a conversation. As I said, have lunch with somebody, do that there. So it's really, you can see, all about increasing frequency of communication. A couple of other small things. Show compassion. This is for some people, I know, a really tough time. And I know here in Singapore, many of us have kind of been working at home in these arrangements now for a few weeks. It's going to go on for quite a long time in some places, and some people are finding it hard. Take time to talk with people and support them. And then also, don't forget to appreciate each other. Say thanks, give them a compliment. Good job on that. Really like the way you did that. So we've got that connection. I'm going to just touch on this because I need to move on and say that peer coaching is also another thing you could do. Plan a coaching conversation with a colleague and talk through, how's it going? Take 5 minutes each, and that's a good space. Okay, so I'm going to just keep going and invite anybody who's got any questions to bring their questions in. So a few tips about managing others. Let's just do this poll. Do you communicate more or less when you're working from home? And just while we're doing that, a couple of people have said, is there a balance between working from home and working from the office? I think probably there is. I think probably for many people, working from home all the time isn't ideal, and they want to go into the office. I know many organisations, EY in London, for example, have now got, everybody has the option to work from home when they want to or not, and so people do that in that way. Okay, so we've got a real mix of communicate more or communicate less or communicate the same when we're working from home. So I think the interesting thing is, here's not many people are saying they communicate more, but actually, sorry, I didn't share the results. You can see that now. Actually, what the research is showing is that communicate more is the really important thing. So what we see from the research is that what passes for being okay in the office, we can kind of get away with it sometimes as a leader in the virtual environment when people are working from home actually doesn't work. And so as leaders, we need to be more mindful and not less about how we're leading our colleagues at home. And underpinning a lot of this, as we've already heard, is this idea of the water cooler. How do we create trust and build a sort of virtual water cooler, build informal times when we come together to do that? So often, I think when we're working separately, we get very task focused. It can be very tempting to, in my case, jump on Zoom and say, right, what was that thing we needed to sort out? Let's get it done. Instead of jumping on Zoom and just saying, take that opportunity to say, hi, how's it going? How are you feeling? Let's connect. Let's just connect. And doing that more, I think, is really important as we work in this virtual environment, to notice our temptation to head straight to the task in every place. We're feeling pressure. There's a lot of stress. Pressure and stress pushes us towards task and away from relationship. And so as leaders, we need to be very mindful about moving to relationship. And so the heart of this for me is building connection and empathy intentionally, taking the time to do it. And from a productivity basis, that means being clear about expectations. Talk with the team about work time and break time and how many hours they should be working and when they should be stopping. Have those very explicit conversations. Have a team conversation. And for some people, this might be the opportunity for somebody to work from 8 till 5 and somebody else to work from 10 till 7. This might be their opportunity to work the hours that works better for them. Focus on successes, celebrate what's gone well each week so that people at least see that things are getting done, that they know that things are productive, even though they may not see people working. And think about output. So what did we do? Not how did we do it or when did we do it? So focusing on output-based leadership, I think, is really important. From a communication perspective, certainly in our team, we try and touch base every day as a team, come together at 10, whoever's working, not everybody, come together, let's just catch up, let's answer any questions, at least we know that's there. You can do a few other things, put photos of your team near your workspace, because then you will remember them, they will come into your mind. And I have a couple of other things. Wherever possible, get people on video. It's mostly possible now, I think. I heard a couple of people say bandwidth in some countries causes a challenge of that, but I would say let's get on video and see each other. And then just a little bit about chat. If you're using chat a lot, which you probably are, also touch base with people on the chat. Hi, how are you doing? Or what's the weather like? Or have you eaten? Did you take a break yet? Check in with people, even on the chat. Connect and relate, even in the chat. Okay, so I've got another question. I'm going to go on to the final tips. I'm aware we're already at 1. So somebody says, if you know a colleague with special needs, yeah, schedule time in your calendar to reach out. This is a time to take extra special care of colleagues. And if you think about it, some of us don't have easy relationships with our families, and now we might be at home with them all the time. Anything that we can do to take care of the mental health and well-being of our teams is really critical. So a few final tips. Take 5 at the beginning of the day, check in with each other, leader or colleague. How are you doing today? You know, how do you feel? Are you ready for the day? Anything I can help you with today? Take those 5 minutes. Think about getting that movement in. Can you move when you're talking? Can you take a call on the phone and wander around the apartment, even if you're going around in a circle? Can you at least get some movement in so we're not just sitting all the time? And then just drop by for a chat. Send a message and say, how are you doing? Should we just have a conversation with each other for 5 minutes? And say hi, don't do any work. Just say hi, let's have coffee. And I'll get a coffee, you get a coffee, let's have coffee. And so taking that time. I guess if I want you to take away one message today, it's about this. I believe that at the heart of helping us to feel well and productive at home, it's about our relationships and how we connect and build those relationships. And so I'd like to encourage you to really focus on that in the coming weeks. Just a few final points from me. As you know, we're an ICF accredited program. Our next coach certification program starts on the 21st of April. And if you want to join a previous session where I share more about those, you can find them at our website. It's a program about coaching and work, and we run it in Zoom in the interactive classroom. So in this environment, this is like my home in this space, to train confident and skilled coaches. So I'd really like to say thank you for joining today. And as you sign out, I have a couple of favors. The first is, would you mind just sharing with me whether this has been useful or not? That's just helpful for us moving forward, but also just to type into the chat any particular takeaways that you're taking from today's webinar, and also any other topics that you might like me to cover in the coming weeks. And thank you very much for joining us, and I look forward to seeing you again in the future.